whereas death is that can be predicted. The kind of palliative care interventions can start at the beginning itself, and we can have discussions about advanced care planning, end of life care planning. All those things can happen start at the beginning itself. So what I mean to say is the interventions can be planned according to the disease trajectories. At least for these two and three, it can be planned out. Maybe for the first, it will be like a crisis management kind of intervention, which we have to look into from the palliative care perspective. Next slide, please. Okay, so when we look into this approaches to palliative care, earlier, as I was mentioning in the first slide, if you remember, the traditional, from the traditional to the traditional model, like a medical model to the palliative care, it was this traditional model which I have put in the slide. Like the diagnosis, there will be like a neurological medical specialty who's working on it, and when the death occurs, it is like a separate compartment. Then the palliative care intervention starts. So that was the first model. Then there was a shift in that model wherein palliative care services started getting more and more importance along with the normal medical care. However, the proportion of the interventions varied there also. Earlier phases of the illness saw the medical management more, whereas the later stages of the illness, the palliative care model was more. If you can just look into the diagram, it's very well self-explanatory. And the third model is dynamic involvement of palliative care services, which has been followed in most of the conditions, most of the hospitals now. Like there is a diagnosis, and remember the disease trajectory which I was showing. There is like different triggers for these many of the illnesses, and palliative care is applicable in all these trigger points. So there is a dynamic involvement of palliative care, and this is the model which is supposed to be followed, or which is like they are advocating, the palliative care professionals are advocating for this kind of model to be practiced irrespective of the illness conditions. That is to start from the interventions from the beginning and give support wherever required, wherever the triggers comes in. So okay, next slide please. So when we discuss about the models of palliative care, especially with regard to the Indian scenario, whereas like we have hospital-based palliative care interventions, home-based palliative care teams are there for many of the hospitals and also the NGOs working in the field of palliative care. And there is hospice model, but it's very limited in India, especially this very limited hospice centers, and that too it's been located in some of the metros. And there is another thing called neighborhood network palliative care program, which is well proven and well practiced. It started from the state of Kerala, and it's been modeled and tried out in different parts of the world. So these are the four major models of palliative care delivery services. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So when we look into the essential skills of palliative care, which has been mentioned in MSW Palliative Care, National Association for Social Workers Code of Practice for Palliative Care and End-of-Life Care, these are the major principles which have been mentioned there. The social worker should have, these are the major skills, the skill set which is required. So we know that being social workers, we have to work in different settings, and we may not be getting training for one particular setting alone. But while we are in the field, while we are working in the field, we have chances of doing a lot of online courses, or we have the chance for updating our knowledge and improving our skills in different areas. And for the palliative care per se, these are the essential skills required, like the ability to recognize signs and symptoms of impending death and prepare family members in that manner, and competence in facilitating communication among the clients, family members, and members of treating team, integrating grief theories into practice, determining appropriate interventions based on assessment. We heard from ma'am that how important assessment is. So we have to be skilled in determining the appropriate interventions based on the assessment, and advocating for the clients, family members, and caregivers for the needed service, including the pain management, and the competence in navigating a complex network of resources and making appropriate linkages for the families and clients. And there should be competence in supporting clients, families, and caregivers, including anticipatory mourning, grief, bereavement, and follow-up services. So it is, if you look into it, it's not just the illness or just the condition matters here. The person is more important. The journey of the person from the diagnosis till his grave or after that for the family. A social worker can play a vital role in it, and we should be skillful in all these areas to function adequately. Next slide, please. So here we are discussing about the steps in rehabilitation and palliative care. When we discuss about the rehabilitation and the palliative care, what are the process of it, and how we have to go ahead in the process. I'll just mention to you that first step is the baseline evaluation, wherein I'll go into rehabilitation first and then palliative care, so that we can compare between both the things. So in the rehabilitation, we should have a baseline evaluation wherein we are looking at the physical status, psychological status, medical history, and including the past response to the treatments and all the pre-illness functional status and the rate of changes, vocational perspective and goals, family and community resources. So all these things, it's not only the illness, the resource part of it should also come under our baseline evaluation. And the second step is identifying a problem, resources and capabilities. So the general medical problems along what are the comorbidities which the person is having, any neurological impairments are there, what are the functional disabilities of the patient, the handicaps which he is facing, identify the residual capacity, what he or she is able to do, and identifying the relationship between all these capacities and his or her resources. That forms our second step of our rehabilitation. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, then comes the treatment to it, wherein we are educating and communicating to the family, patient, and the significant others to familiarize them with the disease. So many times, as I mentioned at the beginning, when we approach a hospital, we should have cure. Cure is the minimum demand whoever approach a hospital. So it is the role of a social worker, to medical and psychiatric social worker, to educate the person and the family what to be expected, what are the limitations which can happen due to illness. They should be very clear. Otherwise, what happens? They'll go to another hospital. So it is like the doctor shopping, and all those things social impact of any illness can be curtailed at that point when we give them a proper education and communication. That communication, like train the patient and the family to learn, communicate meaningfully with the healthcare professional and to each other, and to improve the patient's self-esteem and control. After the treatment, there should be a continuity of follow-up of care, like the specific recommendations which are being made during the hospital stay or the rehabilitation program should be continued through routine, timely follow-ups. So it should be ensured, even a telephonic follow-up or direct contact from the therapist and the client should be ensured to ensure the follow-up and continuity of care. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, can you just move back to the slide? The first one wherein we discussed about this again. Okay, once more. Yeah. So here I think we missed a slide. Enough, sir. Thank you. Just next slide, please. After this identifying this thing, I think we missed a slide that I'll mention when I'm mentioning about the palliative care in rehabilitation. So the first one is the baseline evaluation. Second is identifying resources and capabilities. Next slide, please, sir. Next is setting the goals for intervention. Then prioritize what is the best, how should we prioritize, and then comes the treatment and follow-up. So 5 stages are there in rehabilitation. And so can you go to the previous slide? Sorry for the confusion. Just go. Yeah, thank you. In the steps in palliative care, when we look similarly to that of rehabilitation, as we know, assessment is very essential. Here, see, the thing is, assessment is essential, but the components of the assessment can be a little different depending on the approach for our intervention. Okay, for the rehabilitation point of view, we may be focusing more on what is the residual capacity, what are the resources, what are the goals, what are the vocational goals and all. Wherein in palliative care, we may be doing a lot of the individual factors, family dynamics, who is there, caregiving issues, social factors, financial factors, employment history, spiritual issues, spiritual background, all those things can become a baseline assessment. So there could be components of the assessment which is common in all the interventions, irrespective of the models, but then there could be some differences as well. I just wanted you to be mindful about it. Then after assessment, what? After assessment, we have to consolidate the findings, no, like understand the resources, limitations, stress, and thereby aiding in development of an effective care plan. Only when we consolidate the assessment, we will be able to move ahead. Thank you. We'll be move ahead in developing a care plan wherein we discuss with a multidisciplinary team. This is the findings from our assessment. Based on that, what we do? We do our interventions. So once the assessment is over, we consolidate the assessment, we discuss with the team, and then we go to the intervention or the treatment planning. Incorporate the assessments in the developing and implementing intervention plans and enhance clients' abilities and decision making. And then we are doing a lot of intervention, casework, breaking the bad news, counseling and psychotherapy, family casework, family psychoeducation, caregivers, mental health, discussing ethical issues, and social group work are some of, and bereavement counseling also. These are the some of the interventions which can come from a social work point of view. So these are the steps in rehabilitation and palliative care. Next slide, please. Yeah, again, we can have interventions with the community, like developing an awareness about the palliative care intervention and enhancing the community-based models. And we can have a lot of program planning and development, like how this palliative care can be implemented in the governmental agency level or government policy levels. And there could be a lot of advocacy and research work also. So the role of social work intervention is vast. Next slide, please. Can I go to the next slide? This will come back. So as a conclusion, I would like to say that when we look into our health setting, healthcare system per se, when we expand our healthcare system, the bifurcation between the traditional medical treatment and different models of care, like the rehabilitation or palliative care, it's becoming diluted day by day. So the rehabilitative or the palliative care interventions can start from the time of diagnosis and management, depending on the nature and course of illness. So whatever be the model of care, the ultimate goal is what? Ultimate goal is quality of life of patients as well as the family. So that would be the funda, that would be the prime aim for all our intervention, whatever be the model, whatever be the intervention. So the distinctions are actually getting diluted, but we are moving towards one common goal of improving the patient care and family's care. So that is what I wanted to tell. Sir, I have a case to discuss, but only if we have time. Otherwise, that's fine. This is what my presentation is all about. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I think you can discuss the case.
Is it? I'm having time. Right?
Till then, we can check if participants come up with a few more questions.
Fine. Can you please go to that slide? Okay. Once more. Yeah. See. Just before the conclusion slide. Yeah, thank you. So this is one case which I wanted to discuss with you all. Mrs. V, 45 years old, married, homemaker, had a weakness of both lower limbs for last 6 months and right upper limbs for 2 months, and she was recently diagnosed with motor neuron disease. I hope you are all familiar with the condition, MND. It is a very fatal condition wherein you have a progressive deterioration of all the muscle functions, and finally the person will be in a locked-in state. If you remember Stephen Hawking, that's it. So you will be able to relate more to that illness. So this is one illness which can happen more for men, but then females can also get affected. And this is a lady with MND who has difficulty in both the lower limbs, like she has a difficulty to walk, as well as from last 2 months she got a difficulty with her upper limb, with her hands also, right upper limb also. And her difficulties to do household chores and take care of her school-going child increased since last 2 months. So that is a context.
You're audible.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Please carry on.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello.
Manjusha, ma'am.
Yeah, my power failed. I'll just turn off. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am, you're audible. Kindly, you can switch off your video if you have network issues.
Yeah, sure. I'm just
Okay, ma'am.
explaining. So, just suggest me the adequate ref. I switched off. I s- can you all please suggest some adequate referral and intervention plans for her in the group? You can all comment on the chat, or you can unmute and say
I think we can suggest her to a good neurologist.
possible.
And first of all, I think we should
Mm,
convince the husband, like what is the condition and what she might be going through,
mm,
and ask him to give an emotional support to
mm,
her because she's going through a lot. I think first we
mm,
need to convince the husband to
mm,
take her to the treatment, and I think he should be a little bit
mm,
more supportive to her in our household course, or some other external support can be taken,
mm,
and see to it that she is
mm,
seen,
mm,
like she should be mentally strong, even before she goes to the treatment. I think she should be like
mm,
we have to make her realize that she can cope with this, and she can come like perform normally. That is how I think
mm.
the she should made aware of the situation what she is going through. So,
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Thank you. Anyone? Can you please think from the perspective of rehabilitation and palliative care, whatever we discussed till now, and these can become a part of rehabilitation or a palliative care intervention. Somebody can try.
Participants can unmute and discuss with the speaker. No.
Already, we can think about this. This kind of like when only when we think what could be the possible clarity into the concept whatever we learned. So when I look into this case, this lady can have a lot of rehabilitation as well as the palliative care interventions, right? So the rehabilitation, as somebody just spoke about being more supportive, external support should be brought in. Along with that, we should have some sort of rehabilitation. I think the host can read out the question in the chat box. Okay.
Ma'am,
Right.
questions will be read out. I think you're done with your case study.
Yeah, I'm done with the case study. I'm just concluding 1 minute. So the thing is,
Yeah.
she should have rehabilitation services, which is like assessing her potential. What is her strength, muscle strength, and depending on that, she should have a lot of rehabilitation services like exercise. And as you rightly pointed out, making her aware. So by rehabilitation doesn't just mean that the person is doing some physical exercises and all, but she should be aware of the condition and should be in a position to accept the condition. There are psychological or social or supportive work comes in. So along with that, since the illness is something like a progressive condition, she will definitely require palliative care intervention. As she was mentioning, like husband should be made aware of the condition and what could be or what is the possibilities, possible worsening of the symptoms also should be taught, and then intervention should be carried out. So both can be. What I mean to say is, with one particular illness itself, the intervention in which is based on rehabilitation as well as. So now the questions, whatever you have.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, I think you have some network issues because your voice is not so clear. So we thought we can forward all these questions to you so that you can answer it later to the participants. Is that okay, ma'am?
Right. That's That's fine, ma'am, because there was
Yeah,
a net power
ma'am,
failure, so I'm
excuse
just
me. There
connecting
is,
through the phone internet.
yes, ma'am. One participant has raised their hands, so I think they want to interact with you. We
Right.
shall try this, ma'am.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, this
Participant,
is
kindly. Yes, yes, sir.
Hello.
hello.
Hello. Good morning.
Am I audible?
Sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I'm Renukarya.
Yes, yes.
I want to ask one question. The
Yes, sir.
question is,
Hmm.
how are the rehabilitation centers managing the COVID? Is there any study, or can you throw some light on this?
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that question. Renukarya, sir, the thing is, I'm aware of one service which is like, wherein they are providing telephonic consultation, rehabilitation center, like Mobility Aids India. They have started of providing rehabilitation services online. That is one way they are doing, sir. Does that answer your question, sir?
Sir, I can come in. Can I come in, Pavana?
Yes, yes, ma'am, please.
Sir, to answer your question, the rehabilitation centers as is with the case with all other healthcare facilities and old age homes have at the advent of COVID, they had stopped their services, sir. For example, if we take the rehabilitation services in Nimhans, which we have a psychiatric rehabilitation center, the services that are in person have been put on hold because of the infectivity, and whatever services that can be migrated to online, as in telephonic follow-up and telephonic support, that is currently being provided. And as I was listening to another international webinar, that seemed to be the situation in almost all rehabilitation centers and old age homes and any other center-based facilities as of now. Currently, there is a plan to restart the services with safe distancing and precautions. But as of now, this is the situation, sir.
Okay,
Thank you.
you, madam. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. So we have Pradipta ma'am raising her hands for a question. Pradipta ma'am, you can please carry on.
Yeah, Manjusha ma'am, and probably it's both for Priya ma'am also. As for the Nepal conditions, we are at the beginning of this medical and psychiatric social work. And many times when we interact with hospital settings, they come up out of the family. Family says that we have family members to take care of our ill house member. And they also feel that it's a financial burden while they already are in a financial constraint. So I'd like to know how it began actually in India. Was it very difficult at that time? Or how was your approach that time to begin starting this medical and psychiatric social work? Because for us, we still feel that the families are reluctant, the hospitals are reluctant, and other settings are also not favorable things.
We also have Dr. Prakashi with us, who has been a pioneer in medical social work, starting psychiatric social work in neurology setting in Nimhans, ma'am. Prakashi, ma'am. Ma'am, you are muted.
Yeah,
Would you
Priya,
like to?
however much you have understood, you can contribute. I would like to contribute my experience tomorrow on panel discussion.
Okay, ma'am. Pradipta, ma'am, thank you for that question. As you rightly say, convincing the systems, as in the hospital system, also the patient families, for the need for medical and psychiatric social work, and they need to incorporate sufficient manpower into hospital systems to carry on with this work, is a challenge. So as I understand, I have come into medical setting, as in the psychiatric social work in medical setting, after it has been established by our senior professors here in NIMHANS. So I'm sure the initial struggle of establishing in a medical setting is continuing. So I would say there are two different dimensions to it. One will be convincing the administration that there is a need for having manpower, as in appointing medical and psychiatric social workers in all these areas that we are talking about. That is a systemic change. Meanwhile, we also have to work at convincing the multidisciplinary team who is currently providing care that the decision makers, in usually the hierarchy is so clear that the medical professionals are at the higher level who have the decision making power. So we need to be able to show by our work, as in making a difference, that we are able to contribute towards the medical, the well-being, because almost all medical systems work on the basis of patients should get better. And we are contributing towards patient getting better and making a difference in their well-being. Having different goals that are coming up is very important. Yesterday also there was one question, I believe, from one Miss Pooja from Baroda, who spoke about how do we, when there is no medical social work in a hospital, in a particular place, how do we start establishing the need for it? I would say when we are in a social work, medical and psychiatric educational field, it is important to liaison with our respective hospitals in our environment, and at least start with fieldwork placement. Fieldwork placement under supervision with the as in the faculty being equally involved in supervision and practice that is happening, we will be able to show a difference and make convince the people who are involved that it is possible to have a change from our medical and psychiatric social workers. I think that is one good beginning point. And again, we need to, it's a process that will happen over a period of time, ma'am. And in India, I think India also, it is not in all places that we have reached the level that we are talking about. We are talking about in NIMHANS, and we are talking about some select institutes of national importance in India. A long way, has to be a lot more that has to be done in different medical settings in order to establish the presence of and the need for medical and psychiatric social work. I think that is what I would like to say at this point.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Thank you. That was.
We have one of the participants raising hands, Ila Pandya. They want to add to the treatment of the case discussed by Manjusha ma'am. So the participants can introduce yourself and interact with the speaker.
I am Ila from Faculty of Social Work, MS University, Baroda, Gujarat. And I just noted down certain things from the case discussed. As it is, she is young, she is not that old. First thing is, with the help of a counselor, we can help the family to accept the reality that she needs help. And she is at vulnerable state because she has to take care of the household force and the young child also. Looking at the financial condition, and if they have health insurance of the family and the lady, immediate treatment can be given, and with the help of neurologist. And for long-term treatment, we can ask her to consult the physiotherapist also. And immediate help of neighbors and extended family members can also be given. So these are the points I noted down immediately after the case was read. Thank you. I hope it was good. It was good suggestion.
Thank you, ma'am.
Manju?
Manjusha ma'am.
Manju?
Manjusha ma'am.
I think her network is down.
Yes,
Thank you, Ila, for that addition to the treatment plan.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we take up the other questions, or we'll?
No, ma'am. We are moving to the next session.
Let's go on.
So yes, ma'am. So before we move on to the next session, I request Mr. Indushekara to thank the speaker. Indu sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my privilege to thank Dr. Manjusha Variaji, Assistant Professor, Department of Psychology, Christ University, Bangalore. She has throughout her session, she has highlighted various illness models such as crisis phase, chronic phase, and tertiary phase. And also she is highlighted on the various issues of rehabilitation, principles to be adapted during the rehabilitation, and various models of rehabilitation. And also she has highlighted the palliative care, and especially it's not an end life care, it is a quality of care. That's what she highlighted. And also she has highlighted various issues associated with the palliative care, and also role of social work, how effectively we can handle the palliative care. And on behalf of the organizing committee, and also personally, I would like to acknowledge for you for sharing your wisdom and knowledge, madam. Thank you so much for your valuable time. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for the suggestions. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
My
ma'am.
connection is really poor. I can hear, but not really. Sorry.
Yes, ma'am. I request all the participants to switch on your videos so that we can take a picture with the resource person. Priya, ma'am. Kindly switch on the video. We can take a group photo with the speaker. Tejasvi sir is frozen. Priya, ma'am, kindly switch on your video. Yeah, okay. Are we done?
Tejasvi sir, are we done?
Tejasvi sir?
He said yes, Tejasvi.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. We shall move ahead to the third session for the day. We have Dr. Sonia Pereira Dury, Professor and Head of HOD, Department of Psychiatric Social Work, LGB Regional Institute of Mental Health, Tezpur, Assam, India. Madam will talk on medical and psychiatric social work practice in institutions, NGOs, and community. I request Ms. Aditi Joshi to introduce the speaker.
Madam, I take this privilege to introduce Dr. Sonia Pereira, who completed MSW from School of Social Work, Roshni Nilayar, Mangaluru, Karnataka, MPhil in Psychiatric Social Work from National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, NIMHANS, Bangalore, Karnataka, and PhD from Mizoram University. She has been instrumental in establishing the Department of Psychiatric Social Work and the Center for Rehabilitation Sciences, LGBRIMH, Tezpur, Assam. She started the first clinical training and research program, MPhil in PSW and PhD program in Psychiatric Social Work in the Northeast India. Dr. Sonia initiated the reintegration and rehabilitation activities of destitute and abandoned long-stay patients. She also initiated the community service in mental health and rehabilitation service planning at the institute. She is the public advocate for psychiatric social work, education, life skill initiatives, homeless, mentally ill, community mental health, and rehabilitation and mental health. Over to you, Sonia, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody who has gathered here for this.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Is the screen visible? Is the screen visible?
Tejasvi sir, I was sharing. Should I stop and let ma'am share the screen? No, that was me. Yeah, I stopped.
Yeah, I'm not sharing as yet.
No, I stopped. Should I?
Yes, I'm not able to can do it, but you know, I
Okay.
prefer to share
Okay.
it myself.
Now it's closed from my side. I stopped. Okay. Ma'am can go.
Is it visible? Visible. Okay. Right. We are good to go, I guess. Okay. Okay. I'm just changing it. It's moving. It's moving. I hope it's moving for you all. Right? Okay. Okay. We have this. Thank you for the wonderful presentations by my, so to say, I think they're all juniors. We're young professionals in psychiatric social work and medical social work who are presented till now. It has been so exhaustive. I think the work is made lesser for me, and because they have deeply and very exhaustively gone into every area of, almost every area of medical and psychiatric social work, and especially rehabilitation, palliative care, you know. There are a lot of things in it. And with an understanding that mostly students, let's have an overview of what is medical social work and psychiatric social work and how it is applicable, or it can be looked at in institutions, NGOs, and community as per the topic given to me by the organizers. We'll have a brief overview of these areas. That is basically what are the theoretical underpinnings, definitions, which we all generally know. Being in this profession, I think most of us are already accustomed and used to this areas of deliberations. The qualifications, very important to understand who are the medical social workers, who are the psychiatric social workers, since most of the people who are accessing this are persons who are undergoing the course. I'm addressing mainly persons who are undergoing the MSW program or the BSW program primarily. So with that understanding, you know, I've made this as simple as possible, and we'll look at a brief idea of how the historical development has happened in medical and psychiatric social work, and then the associations involved in, of course, I would be talking mainly what's existent in India, because we are living here, and, you know, I'm not looked at any other way, because I am aware that the students from Nepal are attending. Then the roles that we have of a medical social worker and a psychiatric social worker. And then what is it that we can do as MPSW, the medical and psychiatric social workers in various institutions, the NGOs, and the community. It's just an overview. We'll go through it and we can take a few questions. My area of work has always been in psychiatric social work. I've never been in the medical setup, but we are very much aware that there has been a leap in the professional psychiatric social work compared to medical social work. I feel there has been a leap, mainly because of the National Mental Health Program and the DMHP program, and also the mandate from the government for sort of developing the manpower in the area of mental health. Comparatively, I feel that the medical social work, areas have not comparatively developed so much compared to psychiatric social work. Okay, getting back to the area, social work as a profession has come into existence initially, when hundred years back, 150 years back, when social work started. It was realized that, simple material supplies could not mitigate the sufferings of recipients of AIDS. But it was also very important that persons who are helping process, they also looked at the individual, the psychological status, the social status, and the psychosocial problem that the person was having, and also what are the coping mechanisms that the persons had. But this was mainly emphasized by Mary Richmond, who is the most prominent person in social work, and we have a Bible that she gave us, the social diagnosis and what is social work, which is basically a Bible for all social workers. And I think at some part of your life, we should look into this. It's quite a magnanimous opus, and we should have an idea about what's there. It's very, very detailed for those years. Even it's about 103 years, since we have that book, and it's available on the net. Dear students, it's available on the net. We can always, look through it. Sometime in our life, I think we should all go into it, because it's a very detailed and very structured, and it's little trouble reading because the words are slightly small, but I think it's important because all that we're talking of today has been, dealt with and quite exhaustively dealt with in the social diagnosis. Mary Richmond stressed on the social functioning and the role of environment in shaping the realities of people and gave impetus to the method of social. She emphasized on the method of social investigation, and very importantly, stressed on the context of people. The social investigation involved understanding the context of people, and later we find that it is the biological understanding, the systems theory that was brought about, was another framework that impacted social work practice, that posited that behavior is influenced by a multitude of factors and work within a large system. There's a large system and there's multiple smaller systems, and all of these posit together, and they do make an impact on the place. And no single part can function without looking at the whole. So the whole is more important than the part. The parts contribute to the whole, and that is what the system theory tells, and that has been mostly used in the families, understanding of issues within the family, understanding of problems within the societal area. Various areas can be looked at from the systems theory that was given by Yuri Bertalanffy, in way back in 1968. Most often, the system of family, friends, and societal groups, socioeconomic class, and home environment impacted the individuals in their thinking and the way they act. And as I said, it's mostly been used in the family systems. Even otherwise, it can be applied to various areas. Later, we find that 1970s, it was the ecological perspective that came into being, which brought in the which also was based on the systems theory, and then but they recoined it and said it more, brought about the ecological perspective to social work given by German and Hartman. And ecological approach provided the need to look at the adaptive balance between the goodness of fit. How important are how are people fitting in within the system? How important is the individual fitting within the system? If this fit is not adequate, or if there is misfit, it is important that we correct the system surrounding the person. So basically, they looked at the system perspective, but emphasized on the adjustment that exists between all the systems around the person, the client and the environment. So basically, we looked at during those, during these times, the 1970s and 80s, we find that in the person and environment coming into the picture. And basically, that's what we all as social workers do. We look at the individual, we look at the family, and we look at the environment around which and through which we tailor down a way of looking at problems and accessing the services around those areas of, problematic areas. So if you were to look at this, I will not deliberate so much on this. We have Mary Richmond giving us this definition. Then we have Friedlander who has given us this definition too. And most of you are very much aware about it. And then we have a definition of social work, medical social work, which says that, which is given by Park and Park, which is a book that has mainly used by often in psychiatric social work as well as medical social work. People who are in, who have been have undergone medical social work training, Park and Park is a very important book which gives us an ample understanding of social and preventive medicine. It gives us an overview of various aspects of social and preventive medicine as part of promotive and preventive, areas of health. It is a very important book. So they have described this. Finally, there's an understanding that medical social workers are paramedical workers who have been trained in social work, social case work, and they are experts, or they have the biggest tool that they have as medical social work is the art of interviewing people. And essentially, they use the method of, the method that we have, the basic three method, that is the case work and the group work and the community work. And these are the main techniques by which the social background of a person and the disease around which the person is having, they are assessed through these mechanisms. And if we look at psychiatric social work, on the other hand, we have Ashton and Brown telling us that social work is undertaken in a direct and responsible relationship with psychiatry. So psychiatric social work has very often centered around psychiatric centers, mental health centers. And of course, the West has moved on to call it more of, especially the US has gone on to call it more of clinical social work, because they undertake both the medical as well as the psychiatric side. Both are looked after. Of course, in India, we are still with the concept of psychiatric social work. And we did not know, maybe over years of, as years go by, this may change and we may have a broader perspective of understanding, and maybe it will, over a period of time, it may become clinical social work. Psychiatric social work is a specialized field of social work in which methods of social work are practiced in mental health setting, either with individuals, families, and communities, with the purpose of prevention of health. Here, there's a lot of emphasis on prevention and promotion of mental health and hygiene. So whether it is at the primary level or the tertiary level, secondary level or the tertiary level, at every level there is a process of prevention and promotion of mental health, which is one of the areas that social workers, psychiatric social workers work on. So if we were to look at the qualifications, so who is a social worker? Social worker is somebody could be a bachelor's degree holder, bachelor's degree holder in social work, a BSW person. It could be a person with 2 years master's degree holder. And of course, a medical social worker and psychiatric social worker have been defined differently. So medical social worker is somebody who has, of course, very often we find advertisements coming up which says the medical social worker is also a person with just +2 qualification. Very often, we are often at we come across advertisements that tell us medical social workers, especially this has come up in, I know I'm putting up controversial areas, but that's a fact, that very often, +2 is the requirement, class 12 is the requirement for being a medical social worker or a caseworker. This is happening in India. So there is no system where it says that medical social worker one has to be a master's degree holder. So generally, persons with master's degree, people who have medical master's degree, they should have ideally a specialization in medical and psychiatric social work, otherwise what we call as MPSW. That is a requirement ideally for a medical social worker. In the context of psychiatric social worker, it has changed over the last 3 or 4 years. And definitely we have a mandate coming from the Mental Health Act, which has brought in a certain amount of surety through the promulgation of the Act, the Mental Health Act, which is made a requirement that, the Master of Philosophy, that's the MPhil program, as a prerequisite for defining or for being a psychiatric social. Of course, this again is under contention again, because with the new NEP that has come in place, we are looking at various nomenclatures which can help us recoin this training program. And a lot of associations, especially the Association of Psychiatric Social Work Professionals, looking at this area, and all the departments of psychiatric social work. There are about 21 institutions across India which are running the MPhil program, and all are in discussion in order to look at ways in which we can recoin or give a name or provide a name for the nomenclature for the 2 years MPhil training program. But again, this is under contention. It is under, we can't say the sub judice, but it's there in the public arena, and a lot of things are happening in this area to see what we can do about either. I don't think it will be retained, but we'll have to recoin and put in give a new nomenclature for this training program. So this brings us to understand how did it all began. In India, it started in 1936. We all know the historical development of psychiatric social work as well as medical social work. Started with medical and psychiatric social work, and it definitely started in 1936 at Dorabji Tata Graduate School of Social Work, and it moved on to 1938. JJ Hospital in Mumbai got the first appointment as a trained social worker. Of course, there are a lot of different kinds of social workers available in India. Even politicians are known as workers. But trained social worker, that is why, as young professionals who have come into the field, please, when you introduce your state yourself who you are, please make it a point to say that you are a trained social worker. Don't even try to use professional meaning. I think it's important to say you are a trained social worker. That emphatic information giving that has to be given to public at large is very needed, because we are often tagged with the politician who's a social worker. This is the bane that we have in our country. I'm sure is there across Nepal too. So we have the growth of social work happening at various stages. With the first PSW, psychiatric social work was appointed in child guidance clinic clinic that was run by TIS initially, and then we have in Delhi also child guidance clinics coming up. Then we have various training programs that happened. This training program happened mainly because the health system itself was under review, and we have various committees, the Boer committee, the Mudlia committee, the Srivastav committee, the Shanta Vasist committee. All these committees that were reviewing the health system felt the need for the presence of a social worker, the medical social worker, as well as a psychiatric social worker within the health setup. That is within the medical colleges, within the primary health care, But, it has not trickled down to the primary health care, definitely, but it has definitely trickled to some extent in the mental health system as well as the medical college system. Comparatively, the growth, as I say, that it has been, I think the psychiatric social work personnel has seen a better growth than I say that because that's what I see around. And with this, we have also the courses starting at various places with Niman starting it in 1960s, and then we have the Central Institute of Psychiatry starting it in the 1970s, and so we have, though it started as a diploma program, later it went on to become a degree program with MPhil credits. So the name, it has got various changes in the plan of the training program has been changing over a period of time, diploma to MPhil. And now again, we are in the midst of a crisis when we need to look at, rename the course that we have as, whether it is, of course, the whole education system is going to be revamped with, this, the graduate training itself may become a 4-year program, and, the whole thing may be revamped to the new need of the times, to have the new education policy coming into place. So if we look at the history of psychiatric social work, the history of medical social work is the history of the starting of, the MSW program in various universities and schools of social work and various institutions. But history of psychiatric social work is generally started with NIMANS and then to CIP and then to, various programs in RINPAS. And then we had, of course, it's been a growth from 1968 to 2000. And of course, there have been many institutions. Now, as of now, for psychiatric social work, I will definitely say that there are 21 institutions offering the program. So getting back to what we have looked at till now is what are the qualifications, a brief on, what are the theoretical underpinnings, what is it that we call as psychiatric social work and medical social work, what are the qualifications that are required for defining professionals, and what are the various, sort of the historical growth of the various training programs, as well as the growth of presence of services across the India. So if you look at the professional bodies, this is very important because we need to have a allegiance to a professional body, and we have multiple professional bodies in India, but the one that has been mostly involved in medical social work and psychiatric social work has been the ISPSW, which was initially a psychiatric social work society, which became a professional social work society. And then we have the NAPSWI, it's National Association of Professional Social Workers in India. And then there is a dedicated association for medical social workers, that is the Association of Medical Social Work Professionals, which has been quite active currently with the new bill for the allied health professionals, especially in that area. This association has been very active and has brought the matter to the Rajya Sabha Standing Committee and has pushing forward for all medical social workers as well as psychiatric social workers to be recognized or be accepted within the fold of allied health as health professional as well as allied health. So where we going to fall in, we are really not very sure, but definitely we are all aware and we need to be vigilant about being what's happening in the, what is happening in the councils, the newer councils that are coming up. I think we all as social workers need to be very vigilant and be proactive in order to get ourselves into either whichever is the council that is going to ratify us, or of course we have an alternative that we could have always a council for our own as social workers. That's the other dialogue or the narrative that's going on. And of course we have a newly formed Psychiatric Social Work Association, which is the Association of Psychiatric Social Work Professionals. It's a year old, it's about a year old, and it is just started making itself present, and it has enough members because it's dedicated totally for psychiatric social workers. It doesn't take in people who are from, because we are all basically PG holders, but those who are specialized with an MPhil program are accepted as members for this association. If we were to look at the professional role of a social worker, we can go across this, continuum that, we move and, move in and move forth across various roles that we perform in the during the process of dealing with the client, during the process of dealing with the community, during the process of dealing with the family, or working across the larger arena. So apart from being a conferee, an enabler, broker, this is typically of an ecological model that I'm putting forth, which has been given by Anderson, as well as later in Hernandez. This is an based on ecological model that this role, professional role, is of a social worker. And if we were to what is the mandate left with us in order for us to be, the role of professional social worker, how do we fit into the health system? How do we fit in within the area of health is definitely was provided by the board committee in 19. This is part of history, but definitely these are important areas that we need to look into. But there are very specific areas or the trajectory or the the events that happened across history are very important, especially the recommendation, the board committee, the Mudliar committee, the Shanta Versus committee, the Srivastava committee, and also the various recommendations from UGC. 1961 there was a review committee. Then again, there was another recommendation for social work education in 1975. These are various recommendations that have been given, but it has not moved on to help us in forming a council as such till now. So, but our presence has been made, the felt, and the mandate has been given by various, governmental orders and, notices. And definitely with the NHRC report that came out in 2002, which gave us a ratio of PSWs to 10. This is specifically related to psychiatric patients, where they said that every 25 patients within a hospital system should be having one PSW. And this again, they also postulated that the DMHP program, the district mental health program that is existed in India, which was brought about in 1996 after the national mental health program was declared, national mental health bill that time, 1987. The act was passed, and post that the DMHP program was rolled out, and that also justified the presence of a psychiatric social worker. The same way, the general hospital psychiatry has its presence of general hospital psychiatry has presence of course, the medical social workers as well as the psychiatric social worker. It has been very emphatic that it is required that every MD course in psychiatry is required to have a psychiatric social worker. And this is a requirement that has been given by MCI. And of course, a lot of these areas are flouted. But again, it is I think vigilance is very important, and we as professionals need to be a little proactive when things go out of hand and things are not in place. So therefore our professional associations as well as individuals who are proactive and who are sort of social activists, so to say, need to be vigilant and need to react and come to the forefront to bring it to the notice of policymakers when such things happen. There are not many psychiatric, of course, in the metropolitan cities. Of course, they do take in social workers to do various social service activities and counseling and things like that. Again, child guidance clinics, there are consultant PSWs. And of course, most of it is more of an urban structure more than the primary health care or anything. And the psychiatric psychosocial rehabilitation center, de-addiction centers, then the NGOs that are working in disability and disaster, all these areas have social work personnel, industrial mental health centers, and employee enrichment programs, and the jails. I'm not too sure whether the jails do employ, but maybe in the south to some extent, or Maharashtra, but in the northeastern part and the northern part, I doubt if there are any social workers attached to jails or being appointed within the jail system. Another important part is the school mental health counseling, of course, and if you look at the, we have the school mental health counseling. I do not say our presence is great in the school mental health counseling, except in some states we have the presence of social workers being part of the municipality schools, especially in Maharashtra, I think. The municipality schools do have a social worker attached to the schools. But other places, yes, some of the public health schools, public schools, so to say, are appointing counselors who sometimes happen to be social workers. In the same way, the faculty posts available in health institutes and universities also there are positions of social workers and psychiatric social work as well as medical. So it is more so, of course, the psychiatric social work are present in these setups, the mental health centers. As part of mental health authority, initially, yes, I think very often the social worker existent in a mental health authority was not a trained social worker. Very often, I remember it happened even in the state that I'm living in now, that is Assam. It was a politician who was the psychiatric, who was a social worker on the board of mental health authority. Of course, things changed, and we have professionals or trained professionals in the role, and these roles are very important because it gives you the presence of a trained person. It's a very onerous task to be on these boards and see changes within the state, and also make our roles, present and be very specific as to what we need to do. Of course, as I already said, that MCI regulation has roles for the medical social worker as well as psychiatric social worker in the departments of SPM, that is social and preventive medicine, which is now known as community psychiatrist, community medicine, and of course psychiatry also requires the presence of a psychiatric social worker. But in case of SPM or the community medicine, it is more a medical social worker. But of course, there are other departments. Sometimes some places like metropolitan cities like St. John's and all that, they have an active social service system or social work system, where a lot of people with social work background are taken in. If we were to look at other areas in which social work has made its presence felt, is oncology, tuberculosis centers, the epilepsy centers, HIV/AIDS counseling centers, and please don't mind some typos that are existing in the PPT, and also the various health and mental health projects. Presence of social workers has been very much felt, and as good researchers, we definitely have, as medical researchers, we definitely have a role to play, but it's mainly as research associates. Now, going on to what is the major role that we perform, if you were to look at, as a social worker, where are we fitting in? Is basically our role in any system, whether it is an institutional system, whether it is a hospital system, whether it's a school system, whether it's in a simple NGO system providing rehabilitation services. Our role is basically very, very specific in the sense we need to investigate psychosocial areas. We need to provide curative services through counseling, through casework, through group work, through all our efforts, community building activities, resource mobilization. And we also have, on the site, on the same continuum, we also have rehabilitative activities, which is very important, because if we don't look at rehabilitation as a starting point from cure along with curative services, actually it doesn't fit in. The best time to start, I always remember teachers in immense when they used to say, the rehabilitation happens at the time of, we start treating. The onset of treatment is a time when we need to think in terms of rehabilitation, because we already know the prognosis of illnesses. So therefore, that's the time for people to plan out, look at the potentials. We have had exhaustive presentation on rehabilitation and the various models and the process and, how to go about it. At least it just has definitely been provided. Then this promotive and preventive activities are something that are very important, especially if one is working in the DMHP program, especially if one is on the under the mental health program. There's a district level DMHP for our friends across in Nepal. The program is a district mental health program that is there in every district. Almost most of the districts across India are having this mental health program, and which a social worker, trained social worker, is generally present. Of course, we definitely do not have the assurance that we can say that it is a psychiatric social worker who's there in the DMHP program, though it's a psychiatric services that are offered. But most of them have got some brief training in order to carry on basically the preventive and promotive and the counseling interventions that are required at the DMHP, and also the linkage building activities that are very primary as a social worker in the DMHP program. And of course, on the side, apart from we being educators, we also perform clinical roles. We also have to do a little amount of, research, which is very important, which is definitely the lacuna within social work, because we as social workers actually do not do much of research. We believe in working, but not taking evidence out of it. So it's our primary area of work also has to be supplemented through research activities. If we were to, again, looking at what we do as, the roles of social worker, if you were to look at how we function within the hospital system or any system, any institutions, remember, we plan micro level intervention, we plan meso level intervention, we also plan macro level. Of course, macro level happen more at a larger level, but most often it is the micro and the meso that we concentrate on if you're within the hospital system. But macro, as we move up, as we attain positions, we have a lot of opportunity. Positional power is sometimes we need to use when we reach positions. It is an area in which we use the macro level interventions are planned, and we impact systems so that the policies are impacted and policies are made in favor of the discipline. And this plays a very important role. And all of us should be aware that macro level interventions are also very important, along with the micro level as well as meso level interventions. If we were to again look at the two areas of direct and indirect practice, very specifically, if you say that what are the three things that we do as direct practice skills as a social worker in a health setting, whether it's a medical social worker, whether it's a psychiatric social worker, remember, we are initiating or putting into place casework and group work interventions for patients and their families. This could be task center, problem solving, crisis intervention, behavior modification, remedial model of group work, or home-based family intervention. Remember, home-based family intervention is one of the most important areas that there is a tendency of late to neglect, because the home visiting has taken a backseat compared to earlier times when we used a lot of home visiting, which is one of the tools that we have, which nobody else does. To some extent, yes, the nursing professionals do it, but definitely, I think a social worker, somebody who has the basic skills, the most adept skills for doing a home visit is other social workers. And this is something that we need to hone ourselves with, so that we make use of it as a very important tool that we have. We don't have very many paraphernalia with us to function, but I think the home visiting part is something that we need to build on and look at in order to make ourselves much more effective and have specific areas of work, because most people do not want to move out the areas of comfort, but home visit is something that social workers need to make use of. And during these direct practice skills, we need to have quick screening procedures in order to assess people's problems, look at their disabilities and dysfunctions, and in order to document areas of dysfunction. And brief intervention is a time and tested this thing. Brief intervention, we usually say about 5 to 6 sessions are brief interventions for any kind of social interventions. So this could include varied kind of activities, apart from education, counseling, supportive interventions, and, linking up service or, rehabilitation initiation. These are some of the brief areas that we could work on in a time-tested manner if we are, how busy our systems are. In the indirect practice aspects of our work as medical social worker or as a psychiatric social worker, developing simple manuals for local population is something that we need to concentrate. Training health personnel on the psychosocial areas and conducting public awareness, workshops, orientation programs, and planning and conducting, of course, research. On the side, all of us need to So apart from doing the direct practice, we also have areas of intervention in the indirect practice, which is on the side. It should happen alongside direct practices that we indulge in. If you were to look at the skill base for our work as psychiatric social workers or as medical social workers, remember all our skills, professional skills, relationship skills, and professional qualities that are expected within us as trained personnel. Knowledge, we should be knowledge sound, we should be competence sound, and for all this, we have to have the professional skills, relationship skills, as well as professional qualities, which if one does not have it, if it's not, one is not embedded with it, it's often it comes as part of our training and we get into work, into our experiential activities, we all grow into these. But these are all based on our principles and the values, the basic values of, that are there in social work and the CIS principle, which we put into effect as part of our training at the MSW, BSW level, MSW level, and later as, as part of MPhil training or whatever training that one has undergone. So the role functions, if we were to describe specifically, if as a social worker, as a psychiatric social worker, we would say that it dwells on, especially as MSW students, what is it that we should do when we are posted in our fieldwork settings? We should remember these 4 simple things, 4 or 5 areas that are very important as a psychiatric social. If you are specializing in medical and psychiatric social work, remember it's an intake interview, family assessment, assessment of interaction patterns, social support system, environmental modification, psychoeducation, resource mobilization, psychotherapy if one is trained into it, behavior modification, and so unless you have guidance in doing, of course, if you look at psychotherapy as a large area, everything can come under psychotherapy. But of course, there are contentions to this area that one has to be trained in psychotherapy. So we cannot use psychotherapy without being trained into it. But remember that psychoeducation is also a kind of psychotherapy. But for that, we need to have the knowledge competence as well as the skill competence in order to undertake a psychoeducation program. Reintegration of patient to family and community. Reintegration is a very important because remember that any kind of a mental illness it's a long-standing disabled condition in which persons getting back to the normalcy, they're getting back to their pre-morbid level, the original level, it's generally difficult. And we need to handhold the family, handhold the patient so that the patient gets back as much as possible back into his original functioning. That is where I always tell my students when we're working with in the MPhil program, we often say that it's very important that, it's not just 4 or 5 sessions, but it's a relationship that we use in order to impact the patient and their family. And this has to go on to some extent for a long-term relationship. And this is what we expect. But of course, it can be handed over to somebody because people are always stay within a certain course of certain training for a certain period and with a specific period. So therefore, somebody else has to take over the help that is given to a patient and a family. And of course, preventive and promote. So if we structure our activities on these few areas, definitely we'll have adequate work for any trainee social worker or a trainee medical social worker, trainee psychiatric social worker. When it comes to medical social worker, yes, it's almost the same. I would not say it is any different, but there's a lot of liaising and coordinating that is existent with the treatment team and patient's family. Education on diagnosis at the individual level, group level, the medical condition or the disability arising out of the conditions, coordinating for benefits. The role of a medical social worker is more of a social service provider, coordinating for benefits, providing disability certificate, providing education. Of course, I will not undermine that there is no role of therapy. There is an important role of therapy, but it may not be, it may be a shorter duration compared to the in mental health when it is much longer duration and compared to the medical problem generally, unless it is neurological. We have heard Priya Thomas tell us neurological conditions are long-standing, and so there is a long-term involvement that is necessary for dealing with neurological conditions. Very often it is. And of course, there is environmental manipulation that is required, community resource population, which is a very important area in medical social work, and networking and preventive and promote. Some of the areas are definitely common across psychiatric social work and medical social work. And aftercare services, whether it is in psychiatric social work or it is in this area of medical social work, aftercare services are something that is very important, where social workers need to be much more involved. I feel my understanding with my years of last few years of many 2-3 decades of work is that aftercare is something that most health professionals have really not much of a role, but I think this is an area that we actually can tap on with the digital revolution that is happening. I think we are rightly posited to take on this task of aftercare work and discharge services is something that I think as social workers we've got a huge role to play. We should capitalize on this area more compared to rather than direct services, and this will have a long-term effect on carrying on our work and providing a basis for our work in this area of health setting. If we were to go to the medical psychiatric social work at institutions, we'll see that very often within the institutional setup, it is the government institutions, the hospitals and the clinics, the correctional institutions, the industrial centers, and school and academic institutions. We find these are the areas which employ medical social workers as well as psychiatric social workers. Of course, government institutions, it is medical colleges and the mental health centers and the Department of Psychiatry that employ medical social workers as well as psychiatric social workers. Hospitals, to some extent, the Metropolitan Hospital, we don't see any social workers, trained social workers in primary healthcare centers. I have not come across. And we don't see them in, small mofussil towns. We don't see that. But we do see them in large corporate hospitals, large psychiatric centers, private centers, NGOs, all that we see. And of course, correctional institutions, definitely though there is a mandate for social workers in the correctional institution through the JJ Act and all that, but very often it is not the trained persons who are there on these positions. It is most of the time, it is, it's open to anybody's interpretation. Social work is something that is open to anybody's interpretation, what kind of a social, anybody can declare themselves. So it is very important we as trained people need to come forward and say, this is my position, and offer ourselves as trained psychiatric social workers on the position on the boards that are declared when they ask for social workers to nominate themselves or, to come forward for applying for these positions in the JJ boards and prisons. I'm not aware of any social workers in the system, but yes, as part of our, training, MSW training, we have had social workers being placed. I also did my correctional, the training as part of my MSW specialization. So even though the postings happen, the trainings happen, we visit the jails and the correctional institutions, fit person institutions, or the remand homes. But I have, maybe I am not aware, but I have not seen social workers being appointed there. To some extent, yes, caseworkers are there in some systems, but not generalized. Generally, the social workers generally not appointed. I'm not aware about it. I'm sorry. And of course, industrial centers have a lot of scope, which appoint counselors who have the background as social counselors, as as employee enrichment support programs. We have a lot of people who work within industrial setups, and of course, this is urban based. settings and metro-based settings. And school and academic institutions definitely have academic institutions with psychiatric mental health training programs have the presence of social workers. Schools also to some extent. I will not say it's largely present. It's more counselors most of the time. Very often they are the qualification required for being counselors makes most of the time psychology more than social work. So these are areas that are a little controversial, and though very often, when in my interaction across systems, across institutions, I've always been very vociferous about insisting that, social workers can also be counselors, just like psychology persons can also be counselors. Social work people are adequately trained enough in order to be counselors. If you were to, there are different roles that are specific to all these areas, that is in general hospital psychiatry, psychiatric hospital, psychiatric nursing homes, what is the role that a social worker does is basically centers around psychosocial assessment of problems in illness, psychosocial interventions, and through these interventions, we provide individual psychotherapy, group therapy, family or marital therapy, or rehabilitation. So this runs across, basically our roles as social workers is psychosocial assessment, psychosocial intervention based on the assessment, and for treatment, that is study, diagnosis, and treatment, which is the basis of our casework method, intake, study, diagnosis, and we usually this is applied to any area of our work. So we have psychosocial assessment, psychosocial intervention, and psychosocial treatment, which involves individual psychotherapy, group therapy, supportive interventions, family interventions, and rehabilitation. If we stick to these four major areas of our work, I think we have adequate amount of work. There should not be a feeling that we have no role. This is your role. This is what we can do. And that's something as new professionals, young professionals who are coming into the field, remember, this is an area that we need to be very confident about. So therefore, you have to make yourself knowledgeable. Knowledge competence and skill competence is something that we need to acquire, we need to build on, and take all efforts at this stage in your life in order to be knowledgeable, be skillful. Unless you practice it, you do not get the competence. So even in child guidance clinic, again, it is identification of emotional behavioral problems, parent management programs, child protection programs, the family protection services, and also enhancing. Slightly, there's a variation when it comes to child guidance clinics. Then, of course, the next area of work is the psychosocial rehabilitation, which is very often, many a time, it is run by the NGO sector, the rehabilitation centers, the halfway homes, the long-stay facilities. Here we have a huge role to play because, especially in the metropolitan cities, of course, I'm seeing that there's a lot of opportunity for psychiatric social workers as well as medical social workers. Apart from individual psychosocial assessment, group counseling, and evaluation of clients' abilities, potentials, all these areas are as part of the roles that are played. We have de-addiction centers, palliative care, which we have already had the last presentation on, and various, centers that are running, tuberculosis center, leprosy. All these areas have the presence of psychiatric social worker or a medical social worker. In the context of NMHP or the DMHP, where do we fit in? Most of the time, it is early identification and providing basic interventions that are very important at the district mental health services. And this involves ensuring availability and accessibility, detection, early detection, and linkage building, as well as rehabilitation, which to some extent can be initiated at the rural level even. Then, as if you are a member of a mental health authority, it is mainly monitoring, planning, evaluation, policy making, in which as a social worker, you are expected to impact the system. And of course, as very often, social workers get involved as as part of research projects where we are expected to generate empirical evidences. And empirical evidences, apart from having health issue, we should also look at our own area of interest, which is a social area. When it comes to academic centers, remember that academic training institutions are somewhat in a better area of functioning in the sense that, but it's not an easy area of functioning in which we are at constant, very often at loggerheads with various systems in place. And therefore, but our roles need to be very specific as what we have to do and what we do not have to do. So we have clinical supervisors, we have faculty positions, we have who are function as consultants, we have student training, and we also have research project workers. So within an academic center, which provides academic training and services, and also, so we have three-pronged approaches within academic training institutes where psychiatric social work or medical social work is offered. Mostly, of course, I'm dealing more with psychiatric social workers. It's a three-pronged approach that we have. We have the training, which is most of the time the MPhil training or the short-term trainings or the digital training. And we also have the services, which is predominantly, the OPD-based services, the indoor-based services, as well as the community-based services, and initiating awareness activities and stigma reduction activities, and also taking on the research areas. So if we look at the correction centers, if you go, we have shelter homes, observation homes, special homes, and jails and prisons. So here again, it is the identification of behavioral and psychological, the emotional problems, the social problems existing around the person, assessment of the contextual factors that are involved in persons who are in conflict with law, and child protection issues, and also rehabilitation and behavior modification, which becomes the most important role that a social worker can play. Then, of course, industrial setting. We have talked a little earlier that, employee enrichment programs are very important areas in which social workers are involved in. Absenteeism, alcoholism, family-related programs. These are all areas in which, if you are employed in industrial setup, when if you're appointed as a social worker within industrial setup, these are areas that you can involve yourself, apart from initiating CSR activities, which is a very important wing of industries, and in which, very often it is required that social workers do take the lead in the corporate social responsibility projects is something that social workers can take a leadership in. If we go to NGOs, we find that the NGOs are often work in the health setup or mental health setup. So we have the private health sectors as well as the rehabilitation centers. In this context, we have very many roles that social workers can play. For the family welfare, child welfare, various areas are there what we do as part of youth welfare, depending on what is the objective of an NGO. Therefore, the areas of work, the roles of work of a social worker get directed. And when you come to a community as such, where do we fit in with the community? They say very often social workers are tagged as people who should be working in community only, and not in hospital setup or not in clinical setup. Very often this tag is often there as social workers. I think we can fit in any area of function, but of course, community is something because we are people who are in the social arena. So we have a better understanding of the social context and people, and ability to move across to people is much more, and get connected with people is much more. The ability to adapt and balance between people and across systems and across cultures is much more in a social worker than many other professions. I will not say any other, I'll say many other professions, because I think the connection is much more with the society, and the social dilemmas and social reality is much more compared to other helping professionals. So as part of community, we can be part of research projects, we can be part of CSR projects, or it can be within the community settings. It can be schools, correctional institutions, industry, persons working within schools can need to look out for, intellectual disability. If you are within this society, within the community setting, it's very important as part of school system. If you are employed, if you're engaged, or you are freelancing across the school system, it's very important that we look at the intellectual disability, learning disability. These are areas that social workers can definitely engage in. As part of the roles that we need to perform, we have, apart from the CSR projects and the campaigns of awareness and promotional activities and community-based research projects, there's a lot of roles that we have, multitude of roles that we, but very often it is looking at the vulnerable populations within the healthcare system. That is a role that a social worker is expected to perform. Facilitating healthcare activities or social service activities, and managing care transitions of vulnerable populations. People move across systems, and managing care. That's why I kept on saying, I mean, I deliberated that we have a huge role in aftercare facilities, which we need to be a little more serious about, rather than putting ourselves only in just in treatment or OPD or indoor-based system. But aftercare service is something that we need to build on. In the aftercare services based in the community, we can definitely build on. Another important area that is very, very important is the psychosocial care in disasters and pandemics. We are in the midst of it, a great disaster that is affecting the whole, which has brought normality across the world, which has, even the developed and the developing and the underdeveloped all have come on the same plane. So we stand at the same crisis. Each one across the systems, across the world has come to the same, the same level of fear and anxiety that is abounding around. We are out of, and we need to reach across to systems, and we need to use the media, the technology, the digital transformation that is across. We need to, as Manjusha was also, deliberating some time back, that we need to, sort of use the existing, Manjusha as well as Priya, I think, deliberated that, the current, we are people who connect with people. We need we definitely have the importance of getting across to people in a one-to-one, as well as a family situation or the societal area. But with this divide that has happened through the coronavirus or through the disaster called the pandemic that is happening, we have to evolve ways in which we reach across people and use the system in order to make the most use. But we definitely know that it is this technological facility that is existing in our society is more something that is there in the urban setup. Of course, it is not that people in rural areas are not having phones or not having phone connection, but we need to sort of get across to them. There are various ways. Like, I will tell you one small example that we initiated. With the pandemic happening, we really did not know how to engage our students in activities. Of course, apart from the psychosocial online counseling that was happening, I realized that, most of our patients are not getting the medicines, since we have a free service in our hospital, most of them were very dependent. People around about 3 to 4 districts were very dependent on the free services of medication, and that was available through our institute, through our hospital. So I realized that in the department that we need to reach across to people to find out what are the people doing. So we used the simplest method. We didn't go the online way. We went the online behavioral problems. All these need to be identified at the school system, and intellectual disabilities is very much evident, and they fall out of the system. Most often intellectual disability, children with intellectual disability or mental retardation, as we used to call in the past, they fall out of the system because they don't have a conducive environment, they don't have a sensitive teacher, they don't have anybody to look after them. So identifying, when you're working with schools, remember, identify persons with learning disorders, intellectual disability, post-scholastic behavior, and all these need to be identified when we're working with schools. So going back, I would like to just reiterate that, what we have looked at till now is we have looked at a brief understanding of what is medical social work, psychiatric social work. We have looked at the historical development, how it came about in about last 70 to 80 years, how it has been brought on, and we are current stage what we are. Of course, there has been growth, though we are always saying that there's not adequate growth, but definitely we have grown in this profession, and we stand today fairly tall in order to say that, we have reached a space where we have the government mandate for our presence. So that is growth indeed, from a time when, we were not even recognized at all. And we have also looked at what are the specific direct roles that we have as social worker and indirect roles that we have, and what is it that I can do as a psychiatric social worker, what is it that I can do as a medical social worker if I'm posted. See, I'm addressing mainly the students. Students, if you're posted in these setups, there are simple things that we can initiate. For this, you need to know what is the knowledge base for doing that, what's the skill required for that. That is very important. So getting back to, of course, if this deliberation, the slides, all these are available, of course, and we are available in order, in case somebody wants to get back to us. The email is there, the phone is there. You can always put in an email to us to find out if somewhere we can help you and decide for yourself and guide you into various areas of work, to the little that we can do, we'll always be ready. To conclude, I would like to say that social workers have a definitive role to play in health settings, like whether it is hospitals or any health facility based across in the society. And health professions like PSWs have uniquely adapted to the needs of NMHP program being implemented at district levels. Further, they are one among the mental health professionals at psychiatric centers, both for teaching and clinical services in mental health institutes and Department of Psychiatry. So I would say that the growth of psychiatric social work has been comparatively a little more faster compared to the progress that has happened in the medical social workers. That's my perception, my understanding. And medical social workers are definitely the services are evident in the community medicine teams, social service centers, and medical colleges. In many places, medical social workers are present in dermatology departments, gynecology departments, in some surgical departments also. Medical social workers have made their services felt. And of course, the NGO sector no doubt absorbs the major bulk of the trained psychiatric social workers as well as medical social workers. And I feel that social workers have rightfully and successfully impacted the society with the professional roles through the use of casework, book work, community work, reintegration activities, resource mobilization. These are some of the areas that are very emphatically in which we can say that, these are areas of function in which we have been performing and doing fairly well. And this is what we should stand by, that the methods of social work are grounded and they are evidence. There is evidence of their functioning and doing fairly well. And we need to make use of these terminologies and methods that are existing in social work. And resource mobilization is something that we as social workers are generally looked up to. And disaster psychosocial care is something that we need to, is an area in which, again, which involves a lot of resource mobilization and also providing the psychological first aid and also the crisis intervention is something that is very prominent in disaster psychosocial care management and community intervention at various levels. And of course, the awareness building and the promotive and preventive areas as part of awareness activities is something that is we as social workers are expected to, for which, again, I re-emphasize and reiterate that it's very important that each of us at any level, whether we are 30 years in the profession or 2 years in the profession, I think the primary area is that we need to keep building. That ongoing learning process has to happen. The knowledge building has to be sound, and we should be very sure of our knowledge, and we always get back. It's very important to get back if we do not know. I always say that I'm always learning, because I always tell my students that I'm learning along with you. But when they learn something, they feed there is a loop that happens. If they feed me and I feed them, because I can talk to experiential areas comparatively. The experiential areas or their understanding maybe a little less. But it's the same thing. It's a loop that happens. The learning is always a loop. It happens in a loop. And competence is something that comes with work. It comes with experience. As you keep practicing and building on this practice, competence comes about over a period of time. With this, I would like to close and hope it has thrown a gist of medical social work and psychiatric social work, just in a very bird's eye view of what is there in these areas and where we can function and where we can make ourselves acceptable and be more emphatic and functionally more. What do I say? I can say that functionally we have to be a little more competent, especially. And one area I would like to reiterate is that it's very important that we build on our documentation skills. Very often we have found that, as social workers, we are doers, but we are not writers. We are not documenters, and we rarely write what we do. And this is one of our major lacunas as budding professions in the field across the two systems that we are looking at, the college at Mysore as well as the college at Nepal. As budding professionals, remember, apart from doing work, we need to document our work. That is very important. Only when we document do we...
particular areas. So what I feel is, if we can pick up few ASHA workers who are well qualified in each areas, because they are the most connecting point to us. If we can pick up and train them in social work, maybe by offering some diploma or certificate to them, it will be possible for them to collect data, number one, reach, identify, and make references at a later stage. Because at this point of time, particularly when corona is there, when floods are there, the number of psychological cases are likely to increase. They will definitely multiply. So how to reach them will be a big challenge. So if we can use ASHA workers and then give them small training either locally or digitally, those qualified ASHA workers, there are many graduates, some postgraduates. It will be very easy for us to identify the people and then refer them to the required centers. That is my own feeling. Thank you.
Yes, I would like to tell you that we already are working with the ASHA workers, and we have a few of them who have been trained. 10 years back, they were trained to identify mental health. I'm specifically talking about mental health problems mainly because we are working in that area. They have been trained to identify, and they're looking after these two villages and with two ASHA workers specifically. We trained about 22 of them, but only 2 of them survived to work even after 10 years. And they look after all the medication support through biolistening with the treatment team. And they support about 48 mental patients with their services. And even during the pandemic time, they are the ones who reach out to the hospital to take medicines on behalf of the patients. And of course, they pay them a little bit of, 10 rupees, 20 rupees, or their travel support is looked after. Initially, we got the health department to support their travel. But, there's so much of fear associated with travel and ambulances. The village decided to support them through their own vehicles rather than taking the hospital ambulances. So that's something that is a very encouraging note that the ASHA workers are doing, and we plan to follow them up in a very concerted way and handhold them so that they're able to function and carry on the activities and be of support to our system, which is very important because they are the basic grassroots workers and we need to support. As you rightly suggested, we definitely need to support them and handhold them. They are our torchbearers more than we who are sitting in institutions and departments,
Right.
I feel ASHA workers are definitely our people who we need to train them and handhold them so that, they are able to function in a better way. And they are, of course, much more connected to the people rather than we are connected to them.
Simultaneously, we should make a database.
Yeah.
Statistical database is very important.
Yes, sir. Definitely. And I mentioned that in my last area that, we as social workers, we often, that's a lacuna. I think we don't write much, but compared to, we have so much to talk on experientially, we have so much to talk, but we really don't write adequately,
Yes.
I feel. I don't know where is the handicap in us, but
that
we
is the
do
difference
have that.
between the difference between our country and United States. They work even on very small problems and then create a database and do a lot of work in each area, which we are not doing as academicians. That is the major lacuna that we have.
Yes, sir. Can I know who's speaking, please?
This is Renukarya.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am, he is the director of Pooja Bhagavat Memorial Mahajana Education Center, Mysuru.
Oh.
I request Indu sir to proceed.
Good afternoon, everyone. I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Sonia Pereira Dorai, a professor and HOD Department of Psychiatric Social Work, LGB Regional Institute of Mental Health, Srijampur, Assam, India. Ma'am, you have highlighted various issues in the process of your session. You have started with the evaluation of medical psychiatric social worker at the globe and also in India. You started explaining from the basic concept of definition of social work to the various issues of professional bodies, associations, and the various roles played by the social worker at the various levels, including the promotion level, curative level, rehabilitation level, and training level. And also you have highlighted the various functions of social work professionals. You have taken the complete tour for all the professional social workers, being a social worker, what are the different roles supposed to be played by all of us. Thank you so much, madam, for your valuable knowledge sharing and wisdom sharing with all the participants. It was a very a beautiful journey to understand all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. I now request Rema madam to summarize day 2 of the webinar.
Thank you, ma'am. It's my kind privilege to summarize the day 2 webinar. Very good afternoon, one and all. 3-day international webinar on medical and psychiatric social work, practice in expanding healthcare system, jointly organized by the Department of Social Work, Pooja Bhagavat Memorial Mahajana Education Center, post-graduation wing of SBRR Mahajana First Grade College, Mysuru, and jointly organized with School of Social Work, Kadambari Memorial College of Science and Management, Katmandu, Nepal. The day 2 theme on medical and psychiatric social work, contemporary field of practice. The webinar started as per the schedule. Mrs. Bhavana, Assistant Professor PBMMEC Mysuru, has given the instructions of the webinar, and Ms. Kipa, Lecturer, School of Social Work, Kadambari Memorial College, Katmandu, Nepal, has given the recap of the webinar. So we have 3 eminent speakers of the day, and the eminent speakers and great personalities introduced by Ms. Aditi, Assistant Professor, School of Social Work, Katmandu College, Nepal, and thanked by Mr. Indu Shekhar, Assistant Professor, Department of Social Work, PBMMEC, Mysuru. So we have a great personality with us as a first speaker. So Dr. Priya Teresa Thomas, Associate Professor, Department of Psychiatric Social Work, NIMANS, Bangalore, India. Madam thrown a light upon medical and psychiatric social work practice in psychiatry and neurology. So from Madam's presentation, we learned a lot more information about the social work in healthcare and medical psychiatric social work. She has given very good information and insightful information over the history of 100 years over the history of clinical social work, and she given the definition given by National Association Psychiatric Social Workers, and also she thrown light upon importance of social workers. Especially we learned from Madam's presentation about public health, prevention, care and rehabilitation, and healthcare promotions. And also we learned and we have participants. I think participants have greatly benefited to know more about the goals of psychiatric social workers, which they have given direct service and indirect service. Direct service means especially focus on clients, and indirect service focus on agencies. She also given the results of social workers, those who are contributing in the field of psychiatric social work. So the results of these humans are well-being in all the way, that is client can come out of from the tension, anxiety and so on. And also she has given why it is important and the importance of biopsychosocial recovery, and especially physical challenges, emotional challenges and social and rehabilitation challenges, how it is give a contribution, crucial contribution to come out of the problems of human beings. And very interestingly, she has shared with her practical experience by throwing the light on two case studies of one case is dementia and another case study is dyslexia. And we got to know very insightful information from the madam's presentation. And we have with us a second speaker and dynamic presentation she has done for us. Madam is Dr. Manjusha Warrior G, Assistant Professor, Department of Psychology, Christ University. Madam presented on medical and psychiatric social work practice in rehabilitation and palliative care. So she thrown very insightful information on principles of rehabilitation and restoration, models of rehabilitation, biomedical and social model, biopsychosocial model, and interventional classifications and improvement, and disability and handicapped model, and community-based rehabilitation, and health-related quality of life model. Really, it is very essential and needy information for our participants. From Madam's presentation, we enlightened to know more about essential information in the field of psychiatric social work. So alongside, she also thrown the light on psychiatric rehabilitation, what is the importance of mainly the goals of psychiatric social workers, and how they should understand the community problem, especially palliative care and diseases. And regarding this current situation, she interlinked how the crucial role played by the social workers as well as medical social workers, and which is very enlighten us and very needy information for our participants. Definitely, it is greatly benefited to make use of in their future endeavors. And we have another excellent presenter with us of day 2 international webinar presented by Dr. Sania Periyar, Professor and Head of the Department of Psychiatric Social Work, LGB Regional Institute of Mental Health, Tejpur, Assam, India. Madam presented medical and psychiatric social work practice in institutions, NGOs and communities. Really, it is very excellent presentation, madam. From your presentation, we came to know about the introduction, the in detail theoretical perspective, and as well as practical, and interlinked with community practices, as well as the applications of medical and psychiatric social work. Especially, we came to know about the definitions of all theoretical perspectives, and which is the contribution given by Mary Richmond, and the many theories, especially the system theory, which is very much important to practice social work in the field of various settings. and also how the person adjusts with the various approaches, that is especially you have mentioned ecological approach, and also you have thrown a light upon the training of psychiatric social workers, of professional bodies and professional roles and responsibilities and health settings, especially the committees, the committees which is contributed to bring more and more applications of the current knowledge. And also you have given a vast information about the professional social workers in health settings, professional social workers, especially the activities which is taken by the systematic approaches, especially scientific methods, that is investigative, curative, preventive, promotive and rehabilitation, and how it is interlinked with research and trainings as well. And also you have given very good insightful information about to the participants, how they should work with the community with the help of agencies, especially NGOs, academic centers and hospitals, what are the services they are providing, and especially government settings, what are the schemes are there, what is the facilities are there, which is very much needed for our today's students as well as practitioners, which is really enlighten us. And all the three speakers have presented very good and insightful information, and you have shared with us your expertise. So thank you one and all, and thank you for the opportunity to summarize the session. Have a good day.
Thank you, Prema ma'am. And that's a wrap for day 2 of the 3-day international webinar on medical and psychiatric social work practice in expanding healthcare system. I hope you have found the sessions of the day informative and useful. Thank you for your patient listening and participation. The link for tomorrow's session will be shared on the WhatsApp group, and the session starts at 10 a.m. sharp. So we shall meet tomorrow. Before we leave, we shall have a group photo with the speakers of today. Kindly switch on your videos. We shall have a group photo. Manjusha madam, can you switch on the video?